I held the mop in my shaking hands, in the grandest hall of all the places my son and his new wife had chosen for their wedding. My heart felt like it was shattering into 1,000 pieces the moment my daughter-in-law, with her perfect smile but icy eyes, handed it to me and said, "Clean the floor before guests arrive." My husband just chuckled, pretending it was a joke, and the cold laughter cut through me deeper than any insult. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. I'm 72 years old, and my name is Margaret. That day in that vast Chicago ballroom, surrounded by crystal chandeliers casting rainbows on marble floors, I wasn't the honored mother of the groom. I was the unwanted, invisible ghost expected to scrub floors, literally and figuratively clear from any respect. The air smelled faintly of white roses and expensive perfume, but inside me, a storm brewed like the worst Chicago winter I'd ever endured. I stood there wearing my best navy dress, the one I'd bought at Marshall Field's basement sale 3 months earlier. My hands, marked by 72 years of washing dishes and folding laundry, trembled around that yellow plastic mop handle. The wedding guests would arrive in 2 hours. 200 people who would witness what was supposed to be the happiest day of my son David's life. But instead of pinning his boutonniere or adjusting his tie, I was being handed cleaning supplies like some hired help. The promise of joy melted into the pain of rejection faster than snow on Michigan Avenue in July. My routine for months had been exhausting, organizing wedding details with a hopeful heart while silently breaking under the weight of subtle humiliations. Those text messages I sent asking if I could help went unanswered for days. Phone calls were returned with short, clipped responses. "We've got it handled, Mom." I expected love and warmth. Instead, I received cold neglect wrapped in pretty words and fake smiles. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, stood there in her pristine white robe, her blonde hair perfectly curled, holding a mimosa like she was posing for a magazine. "The caterers spilled some champagne over there," she said, pointing to a corner near the dance floor with the tip of her manicured finger. "And there's mud from someone's shoes by the entrance." My husband Richard stood behind her, adjusting his bow tie in the reflection of a silver serving tray. When I looked at him with pleading eyes, he just shrugged. "It's her wedding day, Margie. Just help out." Help out? As if I hadn't been helping out for the past 34 years of marriage. But let me take you back. Let me tell you how I got to this moment, standing in a ballroom that cost more than my annual Social Security, holding a mop while my family treated me like the help. For decades, I had given, unceasingly, tirelessly, and often without thanks. I remember the sharp silence when I offered my life savings, $43,000 from my retirement account, to help David and Sarah with the down payment on their Lincoln Park condo. $43,000 I'd scraped together working double shifts at the hospital cafeteria and cleaning offices downtown on weekends. "It's not about the money, Mom," David had assured me, but later I overheard Sarah on the phone with her mother, saying it was barely enough to make a difference in this market. Barely enough. $43,000 was barely enough. I fed my family through David's college years when Richard lost his job at the steel mill. I worked 2 jobs, mornings at the hospital, evenings cleaning the merchandise mart. My hands cracked from industrial soap. My feet swelled in those cheap shoes from Payless. But David got his degree. David got his start in that fancy investment firm downtown. I stitched Halloween costumes for my grandchildren Emma and Jake, when Sarah complained that store-bought ones were too common. I sat quietly through endless family dinners where my opinions were brushed aside like crumbs from the table. When I suggested maybe we could spend Christmas at my little house in Albany Park instead of always going to Sarah's parents' mansion in Winnetka, the room went silent. "Mom, don't start," David would say, his voice carrying that tired tone that made me feel smaller than a dust mote floating in afternoon sunlight. One evening last spring, when I gently asked why I was always the last to know about family decisions, Sarah had looked at me with those pale blue eyes and said, "This is our life now, Margaret. Please don't make it harder than it needs to be." The cold in her voice cut deeper than any Chicago wind. It settled in my bones and stayed there for months. Doubts crept in like water through a cracked foundation. Was I just a tool to them? Someone to be used when they needed money or babysitting, then stored away like seasonal decorations until the next emergency. These short, curt conversations and long, cold silences piled up in my memory like snowdrifts, and I started to wonder if they had ever really loved me, or if they just loved what I could do for them. The signs had been there for months, but I'd ignored them. Birthdays that passed with generic cards bought at the last minute. My 72nd birthday in March, David called 2 days late. "Sorry, Mom. Crazy week at work. This Bitcoin investment has been taking all my time." Bitcoin. My son was making a fortune trading cryptocurrency while I counted quarters to buy groceries. When I went to the emergency room in April because my arthritis flared so badly I couldn't open a jar of pickles, I called David's office. His secretary said he was in meetings all day. He didn't call back for 3 days. When he finally did, he sounded annoyed. "Why didn't you call Sarah? She could have driven you." Sarah, who lived 20 minutes away and had never once offered to help with anything that wasn't convenient for her. But the real humiliation started with this wedding. 3 months of planning where I was consulted about nothing important, but expected to handle everything tedious. "Can you address the invitations, Margaret? Your handwriting is so neat." "Can you pick up the centerpieces from the florist? We're both so busy." "Can you call the caterer about the dietary restrictions? They listen better to older women." Every request came wrapped in sweet words that felt like poisoned honey. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found out I wasn't included in the family photos. The photographer's timeline showed pictures with immediate family only: David, Sarah, her parents, her siblings. I wasn't immediate family anymore, apparently. When I mentioned it to Richard, he mumbled something about keeping things simple. Simple for whom? The morning of the rehearsal dinner? I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee from my favorite mug, the one Emma had painted for me in 2nd grade with crooked flowers and "World's Best Grandma" in purple letters. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Can you pick up the programs from Kinko's? Also, we changed the seating chart. You're at table 12 with Richard's cousins from Milwaukee." Table 12. In the back, near the kitchen doors. But the final blow, the one that shattered what was left of my naive hope, came the night before the wedding. I was organizing RSVPs in my living room when my laptop chimed with an email notification. It was meant for Sarah's maid of honor, but somehow got copied to me by mistake. Sarah's words appeared on my screen like a slap across the face. Honestly, Margaret drives me crazy. She acts like she's doing us some huge favor by helping, but she's basically just the cleaning lady at this point. David feels bad, but I'm so done pretending she matters in our decisions. The cleaning lady. I stared at those words until they blurred through my tears. My hands shook so violently I could barely close the laptop. I walked to my bedroom, sat on the edge of my bed, and looked at myself in the mirror across the room. Gray hair pulled back in a simple bun. Lines around my eyes from 7 decades of smiling through pain. When had I become invisible? When had I become just the cleaning lady? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the money I'd given them over the years. Not just the $43,000 for the condo down payment. There was the $15,000 when Sarah wanted to quit her job to find herself after college. The $8,000 for David's graduate school application fees. The countless dinners I'd paid for, gifts I'd bought, emergencies I'd covered. I calculated it in my head, lying there in the dark. Over the past 10 years, I'd given them more than $80,000. My Social Security checks, my small pension from the hospital, money I'd saved by buying day-old bread and generic medications. And for what? So I could be called the cleaning lady behind my back? The next morning, standing in that ballroom with the mop in my hands, I felt something inside me crack like ice on Lake Michigan in spring. But this time, instead of something breaking apart, something was breaking free. Sarah was adjusting flower arrangements, her diamond wedding ring catching the light from the chandeliers. Her wedding ring that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. "Margaret," she called without looking at me, "when you're done mopping, can you wipe down the mirrors in the bridal suite? They're all smudged." Richard was talking to Sarah's father near the bar, both of them laughing about something. Probably golf or stocks or whatever men with money talked about when they thought nobody else was listening. I stood there holding that mop, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I really looked around. This ballroom in the Palmer House Hotel probably cost $50,000 to rent for one night. The flowers, white roses and peonies flown in from somewhere exotic, probably cost more than my monthly income. The open bar stocked with top-shelf liquor that most of the guests would barely touch. And here I was, the mother of the groom, being asked to clean the floors. I won't lie and say I had some dramatic moment of clarity. It wasn't like in the movies where music swells and the main character suddenly knows exactly what to do. I just felt tired. Bone deep, soul tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. But there was something else stirring beneath the tiredness. Something I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in decades, I was angry. Really, truly angry. I walked over to where Sarah was fussing with a centerpiece, still holding the mop. She glanced up with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, good. You're starting with the floors. The guests will be here soon." "Sarah," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected, "I need to tell you something." She barely looked at me. "Can it wait? I'm trying to get these flowers perfect for the photographer." "No," I said. "It can't wait." Something in my tone must have caught her attention because she finally looked up from the roses. Richard noticed too and started walking over, probably thinking he needed to smooth things over like he always did. "I've been thinking about something," I continued. "For 72 years, I've been someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother. For 34 years, I've been your husband's mother and tried my best to be a good mother-in-law to you." Sarah's smile faltered slightly. "Margaret, what's this about?" "This is about respect," I said. The mop felt heavy in my hands, but my voice was getting stronger. "This is about being treated like family instead of hired help." Richard reached us then, his face already showing that familiar expression of mild panic he got whenever family drama threatened to surface. "Margie, what's going on? We don't need any problems today." "No problems," I said, looking at him directly. "Just clarity." I turned back to Sarah. "Yesterday, I accidentally received an email where you called me basically just the cleaning lady. Today, you handed me an actual mop." Sarah's face went pale beneath her makeup. "Margaret, I've given your family over $80,000 in the past 10 years, I continued. $80,000 from my Social Security and pension? Money I saved by eating generic cereal and walking instead of taking the bus. Money I saved for emergencies that never seemed to include my own." The number hung in the air between us. I could see Richard doing the math in his head, his eyes widening as he realized I wasn't exaggerating. "But you know what the real cost has been?" I asked. "My self-respect, my sense of worth, my belief that I mattered to the people I love most in this world." Sarah tried to interrupt. "You're misunderstanding." "No," I said firmly. "I understand perfectly. I understand that you see me as a piggy bank and a cleaning service. I understand that my son has forgotten that I'm a person with feelings. And I understand that my husband thinks it's easier to laugh at my humiliation than to defend me." The ballroom had gone quiet. Even the caterers setting up chairs had stopped to listen. David appeared from somewhere, probably drawn by the tension in the air. "Mom?" he said uncertainly. "What's happening?" I looked at my son, my boy who I'd raised to be kind and respectful, who I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college, who I'd believed would always love me even when everyone else forgot I existed. "What's happening?" I said. "Is that your mother is remembering she's worth more than this?" I set the mop down, letting it clatter against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the ballroom like a gavel in a courtroom. "I won't be cleaning your floors today," I announced. "I won't be sitting at table 12 in the back. I won't be pretending that being treated like a servant at my own son's wedding is acceptable." Sarah found her voice then, and it was sharp with panic. "You can't be serious. The wedding is in 2 hours. "Oh, I'm very serious," I said. "More serious than I've been about anything in years." I walked over to the elaborate seating chart displayed on an easel near the entrance. My name was indeed at table 12, squeezed between Richard's cousin Harold and his wife Dolores, people I barely knew and saw once a year at family reunions. Without hesitation, I picked up the gold calligraphy pen they'd used for last-minute changes and drew a line through my name. "Margaret!" Sarah gasped. "Stop it!" But I wasn't finished. I walked to the gift table where envelopes full of money and checks were already starting to pile up. Among them was my own envelope, a check for $5,000, money I'd planned to give them for their honeymoon, money I'd scraped together by selling my mother's jewelry and some stocks my parents had left me. I picked up my envelope. "This was going to be my wedding gift," I said, holding it up. $5,000 for your honeymoon in Italy." David stepped forward, his face flushed. "Mom, please don't do this. Not today." "When should I do it, David? After you've forgotten my next birthday? After I've spent another year being ignored and taken for granted? After I've written another check I can't afford because you need help with something that mysteriously becomes urgent right after I get my pension deposit?" The truth of it hit him visibly. His shoulders sagged. "I raised you to be better than this," I continued. "I raised you to treat people with kindness, especially family. But somewhere along the way, you learned that money talks louder than love, and that your mother's feelings matter less than keeping peace in your marriage." Sarah tried to step between us. "Margaret, you're being dramatic. We can work this out after—" "No," I said, and my voice carried across the ballroom like I was speaking from a pulpit. "We can't work this out after. After is what I've been waiting for my whole life. After David graduates. After he finds a good job. After he gets married. After he settles down. After he appreciates what he has." I looked around the ballroom one more time, at the overpriced flowers, the crystal glasses that would hold champagne I'd helped pay for, the dance floor where I wouldn't be dancing because no one would ask me. "After never comes," I said quietly. "After is a lie we tell ourselves while we accept less than we deserve." I tore open the envelope containing my $5,000 check. The paper made a satisfying ripping sound in the quiet ballroom. "This money is going back into my account," I announced, along with every other dollar I was planning to help with in the future. Richard finally found his voice. "Margie, you're embarrassing yourself. And us." I turned to look at the man I'd been married to for 34 years. The man who'd laughed when I was handed a mop at my own son's wedding. "I'm embarrassing myself?" I asked. "Richard, I've spent the last 10 years watching you disappear into your newspaper and your television shows while your son and daughter-in-law treated me like an ATM machine with a cleaning service attached. The only embarrassing thing here is how long it took me to stand up for myself." The silence stretched between us like a canyon. I could hear the distant sounds of Chicago traffic through the tall windows, the normal world going about its normal day, while my world shifted on its axis. Emma and Jake, my grandchildren, had been getting ready in another room, but Emma must have heard the commotion because she appeared in the doorway wearing her flower girl dress. She was 8 years old with David's dark hair and my green eyes. "Grandma?" she said uncertainly. "Are you okay?" My heart softened looking at her. This little girl who still sent me crayon drawings in the mail, who called me every Sunday just to tell me about her week, who lit up when I walked into a room. She was the one pure thing in all this mess. I knelt down to her level, ignoring the ache in my knees. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Grandma just needed to use her voice today." "Are you coming to the wedding?" she asked. I glanced up at David and Sarah, at the panic in their eyes as they realized this wasn't just a tantrum that would blow over. "I don't know yet, Emma," I said honestly, "but I want you to know that I love you very much, no matter what happens with the grown-ups." She hugged me then, her small arms tight around my neck, and I felt tears threaten for the first time since this confrontation began. "I love you too, Grandma," she whispered. "You're the best grandma in the whole world." Over her shoulder, I saw something I hadn't expected. Tears in David's eyes. Real tears. Not the manipulative kind Sarah was famous for, but genuine emotion. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "Didn't realize what?" I asked, still holding Emma. "That I'm a person? That I have feelings? That being treated like a servant might hurt me?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say? That he genuinely hadn't noticed how they treated me? That would make him oblivious. That he'd noticed but didn't care enough to stop it? That would make him cruel. Sarah, meanwhile, was calculating. I could see it in her eyes. How to minimize this crisis. How to get me back in line. How to salvage her perfect wedding day. "Margaret?" she said in a soothing voice that sounded like honey over broken glass. "I think you misunderstood my email. I was just venting to my friend. You know how wedding planning stress gets to everyone." "No," I said, standing up and smoothing Emma's hair. "I understand perfectly. You were being honest in that email, more honest than you've been to my face in years." I looked at my watch. 1 hour and 15 minutes until the guests arrived. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "I'm going home. I'm going to take a bath, put on comfortable clothes, and order Chinese food. I'm going to spend today taking care of myself for once." "But the wedding," Sarah started, "will be beautiful, I'm sure. You planned every detail without my input anyway. You certainly don't need me here to enjoy it." David stepped forward. "Mom, please, we can fix this. We can talk about everything after the reception." There it was again. After. "David," I said sadly, "you're 34 years old. You make more money in a year than I made in 5. You live in a condo that cost more than most people's houses. You're about to marry a woman whose family has more money than sense. What exactly do you need to fix with me?" He struggled for an answer. "What you need to fix," I continued, "is how you treat people who love you. What you need to fix is remembering that your mother is not your bank account. What you need to fix is standing up to your wife when she's cruel instead of standing by and letting it happen." Sarah's mask finally slipped completely. "How dare you call me cruel? After everything we've done for you, including you in our lives, inviting you to dinner?" "Including me?" I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Sarah, I've been excluded from every major decision in your marriage. I found out you were buying your house from a neighbor who saw the moving truck. I learned about Emma's school troubles from Emma herself. You include me when you need money or free babysitting. Otherwise, I'm furniture." Richard tried one more time. "Margie, think about what you're doing. These people are our family." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. When had he become someone who would laugh at my pain? When had he decided that keeping peace was more important than keeping faith with me? "No," I said quietly. "Emma and Jake are my family. David is my family, though he's forgotten how to act like it. You, Richard, stopped being my family the moment you decided my feelings were funny instead of important. And Sarah." I turned to look at her directly. "Sarah has never been my family. She's been a house guest who stayed too long and forgot her manners." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the caterers had stopped what they were doing. I walked to the coat check and retrieved my purse. Inside was my phone, my keys, and the dignity I'd thought I'd lost somewhere along the way. "If anyone needs me," I said, "I'll be living my life. Finally." I started toward the exit, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Behind me, I heard Sarah's voice rising in panic as she realized this wasn't something she could fix with fake tears and false promises. But then Emma's voice called out, "Grandma, wait!" I turned back. She was running toward me, her flower girl dress rustling. "Can I come with you?" she asked. "I don't want to be at a wedding where people are mean to you." My heart broke and mended itself in the same moment. This child, this perfect child, understood what the adults had forgotten. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, kneeling down again. "I would love nothing more than to take you home with me. But it's your daddy's wedding day, and you're the flower girl. He needs you to be there, even if he doesn't deserve it." She hugged me again. "Will I see you soon?" "Yes," I promised. "Very soon. And next time it will be just us. No grown-up drama, no hurt feelings. Just Grandma and Emma time." "Can we paint?" she asked. It was our special activity, the thing we'd done together since she was tiny. "We can paint whatever you want," I said, kissing the top of her head. When I straightened up, David was there. His face was red, and tears were streaming down his cheeks. "Mom," he said, "I love you. I really do love you." "I know you do," I replied. "But love without respect isn't enough anymore. Love without consideration isn't enough. Love that comes with conditions and expiration dates isn't enough." I looked past him to Sarah, who was standing frozen with her perfect makeup running slightly. "If you want me in your lives," I said to both of them, "you need to decide what that actually means. It doesn't mean a piggy bank. It doesn't mean a cleaning service. It doesn't mean someone who smiles and nods while you make decisions that affect her and then acts grateful for scraps of attention." I paused at the ballroom entrance and turned back one last time. "It means treating me like family," I said. "Real family. The kind who deserve respect and consideration and honesty. The kind who get invited to make decisions instead of just paying for them. The kind who matter." And then I left. I walked out of that overpriced ballroom, through the Palmer House lobby with its gilded ceiling and marble columns, past the doorman who tipped his hat politely, and out into the Chicago afternoon. The sun was shining on Michigan Avenue. People were walking their dogs, heading to lunch, living their lives without drama or heartbreak or family dysfunction. The city looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but I felt completely different. For the first time in years, I felt light. I took the Brown Line home to Albany Park, sitting in a seat by the window and watching the familiar neighborhoods roll past. The woman sitting across from me smiled, and I smiled back. When was the last time I'd smiled at a stranger just because it felt good? At home, I ran a hot bath with Epsom salts and lavender oil. I lit the candles Emma had given me for Christmas, the ones shaped like flowers that I'd been saving for special occasions. Today felt special enough. As I soaked in the tub, I thought about what came next. For the first time in decades, I had no one else's schedule to consider, no one else's needs to put before my own. Tomorrow was Sunday. I could sleep in. I could read the newspaper cover to cover. I could walk to the farmer's market and buy flowers just because they were beautiful. My phone buzzed several times with texts, but I ignored it. Whatever crisis was unfolding at the Palmer House ballroom wasn't mine to solve anymore. After my bath, I put on my most comfortable clothes, soft jeans and a sweater Emma had picked out because she said it matched my eyes. I ordered Chinese food from the place on Lincoln Avenue and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving. The fortune cookie made me laugh. Your future is bright when you trust yourself. That evening, I sat on my small back porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was watering her tomatoes in the next yard over. "Beautiful evening," she called over the fence. "Yes," I agreed. "It really is." The wedding reception was probably in full swing by now, The band would be playing, people would be dancing, and Sarah would be holding court in her designer gown. David would be shaking hands and making small talk, probably wondering if I'd meant what I said. For a moment, just a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. This was supposed to be a joyful day. I was supposed to be celebrating my son's happiness, not sitting alone on my back porch. But then I remembered the mop. I remembered Sarah's email. I remembered Richard's laughter. And I realized that I wasn't alone by choice. I'd been alone while surrounded by family for years. At least now it was honest. My phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Sarah this time. I turned off the ringer. Later, as I was getting ready for bed, I finally listened to the messages. David's voice was thick with emotion. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can we please talk? The wedding was. It wasn't the same without you there. Emma kept asking where you were, and I didn't know what to tell her. Please call me back." Sarah's message was different. "Margaret, I don't know what you thought you accomplished today, but you embarrassed our entire family. My parents are asking questions I can't answer, and David is miserable. I hope you're happy." I listened to both messages twice, then deleted them. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning brought more phone calls and text messages. David called 4 times. Richard called twice. Even some relatives I barely spoke to were suddenly reaching out, having heard about the incident at the wedding. I ignored them all and went to the farmer's market instead. At the flower stand, I bought a bouquet of sunflowers just because they made me smile. At the produce stand, I bought the good strawberries. The organic ones I usually passed by because they cost too much. At the cheese booth, I splurged on a piece of aged Gouda that the vendor said was her favorite. Walking home with my purchases, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the simple pleasure of spending money on myself without guilt. That afternoon, I set up my easel on the back porch and painted for the first time in months. The canvas slowly filled with sunflowers and Chicago skylines, bright colors that reflected how I felt inside. Mrs. Chen came over to admire my work. "You're very talented," she said. "Have you ever thought about selling your paintings?" I hadn't. For years, painting had been something I did when I had time, which meant almost never. But looking at the sunflowers taking shape on my canvas, I realized they were good. Really good. "Maybe I should," I said. That evening, Emma called. Her voice was small and sad. "Grandma? Daddy said you were upset at the wedding. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," I assured her. "How are you? Did you like being a flower girl?" "It was okay," she said. "But I missed you. Everyone was asking where you were, and Mommy Sarah looked mad all night." I felt a stab of guilt. Whatever issues I had with the adults, Emma shouldn't have to suffer for them. "Would you like to come visit me next weekend?" I asked. "We could paint and go to the zoo." "Really? Just us?" "Just us," I promised. "Yes," she said, her voice brightening. "Can I bring Jake too?" "Of course." After we hung up, I felt the first real joy I'd experienced since the wedding. Whatever else happened, I wasn't going to lose my grandchildren. They were innocent in all this adult dysfunction. The calls from David and Sarah continued throughout the week, but I didn't answer them. I needed time to think, to figure out what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. On Wednesday, Richard showed up at my door. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. Standing on my front porch in his work clothes, he seemed smaller somehow, diminished. "We need to talk," he said. I invited him in and made coffee, more out of habit than hospitality. We sat at my kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. "You can't just disappear, Margie," he said finally. "We're married. We're a family. You can't solve problems by running away." "I didn't disappear," I replied calmly. I went home. My home, where I pay the rent and make the decisions and don't have to ask permission to exist. He looked confused. What do you mean, your home? This is our home. I shook my head. Richard, you moved out 3 years ago, remember? When David and Sarah needed someone to house sit while they were traveling for that cryptocurrency conference in Miami. You were supposed to stay there for 2 weeks, but you never came back. He opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. Because it was true. He'd been living in David and Sarah's guest room for 3 years, telling himself it was temporary while Sarah redecorated and David worked on his investments. But temporary had become permanent, and he'd never moved back home with me. That's different, he said finally. That's just practical. Their place is bigger, closer to my work. Richard, I interrupted, you retired 2 years ago. What work? Another silence. The point is, he continued, you embarrassed us all at the wedding. Sarah's parents are asking questions. The guests were talking. Let them talk, I said. Maybe they'll talk about why the mother of the groom was handed a mop. Maybe they'll talk about why it's acceptable to treat family like hired help. Maybe those conversations are exactly what we need. He fidgeted with his coffee cup. You're being dramatic. Sarah didn't mean anything by it. She called me basically just the cleaning lady in an email, Richard. How did she not mean anything by it? You read her private emails. She accidentally copied me on one. And that's what you're focusing on? Not what she said, but how I found out. Richard sighed heavily. Look, Sarah's young. She says things when she's stressed. You know how wedding planning gets to people. She's 32 years old, not 16, and this isn't about wedding stress. This is about years of being treated like I don't matter unless they need something from me. I leaned back in my chair and studied my husband's face. When had he become a stranger to me? When had he decided that other people's feelings mattered more than mine? Richard, I said quietly, when was the last time you stood up for me? He looked genuinely puzzled. What do you mean? When was the last time someone was rude to me or dismissive of me or cruel to me and you said, hey, that's my wife and you need to treat her better? He thought about it, and I watched his face change as he realized he couldn't come up with an answer. I don't like conflict, he said finally. Neither do I. But sometimes avoiding conflict means accepting disrespect. Sometimes keeping peace means sacrificing the people you're supposed to protect. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, I could hear children playing in the park across the street, their voices high and happy. What do you want from me? Richard asked finally. It was a fair question, and I considered it carefully before answering. I want you to decide if you're my husband or just someone who used to be married to me, I said. I want you to decide if my feelings matter to you. I want you to decide if you're going to be part of the solution or part of the problem. That's not fair. I love you. Love isn't enough anymore, Richard. I need respect. I need someone who will stand beside me, not behind me making excuses for people who hurt me. He left soon after that, looking troubled and confused. I felt sad watching him go, but not the desperate sadness I'd expected, just the gentle melancholy of something ending that had been over for a long time. The next day, Sarah showed up. She was dressed carefully in what I'd come to recognize as her I'm a reasonable person outfit. Simple but expensive clothing designed to make her look approachable while reminding everyone that she could afford better. Margaret, she said when I opened the door, we need to clear the air. I let her in, curious to see what approach she'd take. She sat on the edge of my couch like she was afraid of catching something. Her eyes swept around my small living room, taking in the second-hand furniture and painted walls. I want to apologize, she began, for the misunderstanding at the wedding. What misunderstanding was that? The email you saw. I was venting to a friend about wedding stress, and I said some things I didn't mean. I never intended for you to see it. So you're sorry I saw it? Not sorry for what you said? She blinked, clearly not expecting me to make that distinction. "I'm sorry for both," she said quickly. "I was overwhelmed with planning, and I took it out on you unfairly." "Sarah," I said, settling into my favorite chair. "That email wasn't about wedding stress. That email was about how you really see me. And honestly, I'm almost grateful you wrote it, because it confirmed what I'd been feeling for years." Her composure slipped slightly. "What you've been feeling? That you don't respect me. That you see me as useful but not important. That you value my contributions, but not my presence." She straightened her shoulders, and I saw a flash of the real Sarah underneath the apologetic facade. "Margaret, I think you may be overly sensitive about some things. David and I have always treated you with respect." "Have you? Let me ask you something. In the 5 years you've been married to my son, how many times have you asked my opinion about something important? Not my help. My opinion." She thought about it, and I could see her struggling to come up with an example. "We value your input." "On what? When you asked me to address wedding invitations? When you needed someone to pick up dry cleaning? When you wanted free babysitting? We've included you in family dinners, where I'm expected to bring a dish, help serve, and clean up afterward while you and David discuss your business ventures and investment strategies like I'm not in the room." Sarah's mask was slipping further. "I don't think you're being fair. We've always been grateful for your help. Grateful for my help, yes. But when was the last time you were interested in my thoughts, my dreams, my feelings about anything that wasn't directly useful to you?" Silence. "Sarah," I continued, "in 5 years of marriage to my son, you've learned that I worked at a hospital cafeteria and that I paint as a hobby. You don't know that I was a supervisor there for 15 years. You don't know that I managed a staff of 12 people and helped reorganize their entire food service system. You don't know that my paintings have been displayed at the Albany Park Art Fair 3 years running." Her eyes widened slightly. Clearly, she hadn't known any of that. "You see me as David's mother, who can be counted on for money and services. You've never seen me as Margaret, a person with her own accomplishments and intelligence and worth." "That's not true. When was my birthday, Sarah?" Another silence. "What's my favorite color? What kind of books do I read? What's my biggest fear? My proudest moment? What makes me laugh?" With each question, she looked smaller. "You've been married to my son for 5 years, I said gently, "and you don't know anything about me except what I can do for you." Sarah stood up abruptly, her careful composure finally cracking completely. "You know what?" she said, her voice sharp with frustration. "Maybe I don't know those things about you because you never talk about them. Maybe I don't ask for your opinions because you never seem to have any. Maybe I see you as just David's mother because that's all you've ever been around us." There it was, the truth she'd been hiding under fake apologies and manufactured tears. "So it's my fault you don't respect me?" I asked. "I'm saying maybe if you acted like you had something valuable to contribute besides money and babysitting, we'd treat you differently." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire. "Thank you," I said quietly. She looked confused. "Thank you for what?" "For finally being honest. For showing me who you really are instead of who you pretend to be." Sarah realized she'd revealed too much. "Margaret, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did, and that's okay. It's better to know where I stand than to keep pretending we have a relationship built on mutual respect." She tried to backtrack, to return to the apologetic act, but it was too late. We both knew what she really thought of me. After she left, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my garden, thinking about what she'd said. Was it possible that I had made myself invisible? Had I been so focused on being helpful that I'd forgotten to be interesting? Had I been so eager to be needed that I'd forgotten to be valued? Maybe. But that didn't excuse how they'd treated me, and it certainly didn't make the mop incident acceptable. That weekend, Emma and Jake came to visit as promised. We painted pictures of flowers and dinosaurs. We went to the zoo and fed the ducks. We made cookies and watched old movies. It was the best weekend I'd had in years. Sunday evening, when David came to pick them up, he looked exhausted. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" Emma and Jake were in the living room watching cartoons, so we sat on the back porch. "I've been thinking about what you said at the wedding," he began. "About the money, about how we've treated you." I waited. "You were right, about a lot of it. We did take advantage of your generosity. We did exclude you from decisions while expecting you to help pay for them." It was a start. "I want to pay you back," he continued. "The money you've given us over the years. I've been doing well with my cryptocurrency investments, and I can afford to return what you've spent on us." "David," I said carefully, "I don't want my money back. I want something more valuable than that." "What?" "I want you to think about whether you actually like me or just need me." He looked startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when was the last time you called me just to talk? Not because you needed something, not because it was my birthday or a holiday, but because you missed talking to me." He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. "When was the last time you asked about my life, my interests, my dreams for the future?" Another silence. "David, I love you more than my own life, but I need to know if you love me as a person or just as a mother, because being someone's mother shouldn't be my only value." Tears were rolling down his face now. "Mom, of course I love you as a person. Then tell me something about me that has nothing to do with being your mother." He struggled, and I could see him thinking desperately, trying to come up with something. "You paint?" he said finally. "What do I paint?" I don't know." "What's my favorite style of art? What inspires me? Have you ever seen any of my finished work?" The answers were no, no, and no. "David," I said gently, "I've been painting Chicago cityscapes for 20 years. I've sold pieces at art fairs. I've taught classes at the community center. But you don't know that because you've never asked." He was crying openly now. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." "I know you are. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" We talked for another hour. Really talked. Maybe for the first time since he was a teenager. I told him about my art, about my dreams of maybe opening a small gallery someday. He told me about his work, about the stress of managing other people's money, about his fears that he wasn't good enough at anything that mattered. When he left that night, something had shifted between us. It wasn't fixed yet. Trust takes time to rebuild. But it was a beginning. The calls from Sarah stopped after their second week. I heard through Emma that she was telling people I was having some kind of breakdown and that they were giving me space to work through my issues. I wasn't having a breakdown. I was having a breakthrough. I started taking art classes at the community college. I joined a book club at the local library. I volunteered at a literacy center, teaching adults to read. For the first time in years, I was building a life that belonged to me. Richard came by occasionally, always looking a little more lost than the time before. He'd moved back into David and Sarah's guest room permanently, but he seemed uncomfortable there. He'd ask about coming home, and I'd ask if he was ready to be a real partner instead of a passive observer of his own life. He never was. 3 months after the wedding, I received an unexpected visitor. Sarah's mother, Elizabeth, whom I'd met briefly at pre-wedding events but never really talked to. She was an elegant woman in her late 50s, perfectly dressed and carefully made up. But there was something tired in her eyes that I recognized. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," she said. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened at the wedding." I invited her in, curious about what she might have to say. "Sarah told me her version," Elizabeth began, "but I wanted to hear yours." I told her the story, the email she'd accidentally sent, The mop incident. The years of being treated like hired help while contributing financially to their lives. Elizabeth listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. "I'm not surprised," she said finally. "Sarah has always been difficult when it comes to sharing attention or respect." "What do you mean?" "She's my daughter, and I love her. But she's never learned that other people have feelings that matter as much as hers. Her father and I tried to teach her empathy, but we may have spoiled her too much. Made her think the world revolved around her." Elizabeth sipped the tea I'd served her and looked around my modest living room with what seemed like genuine appreciation. "You know," she said, "this is lovely. So much more welcoming than their sterile condo." "Thank you. Margaret, I want you to know that what happened at the wedding was inexcusable. If someone had handed me a mop at my son's wedding and my husband had laughed about it, there would have been consequences." It was validating to hear someone else acknowledge how wrong it had been. "I also want you to know," she continued, "that I've had some conversations with Richard." That surprised me. "Oh?" "He's staying with us occasionally now. Sarah finds his presence inconvenient. And honestly, he seems lost, like he doesn't know who he is anymore. Richard has spent so many years avoiding conflict that I think he's forgotten how to have opinions," I said. "It's easier to go along with whoever's loudest." "That must have been lonely for you." It was the first time anyone had acknowledged that, and I felt tears prick my eyes. "It was," I admitted. "Very lonely." Elizabeth reached over and patted my hand. "You know, I have a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition?" "I run a charity that provides art therapy for seniors in nursing homes. We're always looking for volunteer instructors. Sarah mentioned that you paint, though she seemed to think it was just a little hobby." "It's more than a hobby," I said. "It's my passion. I'd love to see some of your work if you wouldn't mind showing me." I brought out several canvases from my bedroom, cityscapes of Chicago in different seasons, still lifes of flowers from my garden, portraits I'd painted from photographs. Elizabeth studied them carefully, her expression growing more impressed with each piece. "These are wonderful," she said. "You have real talent. Have you ever considered selling them professionally? I've sold a few at local art fairs, but I never thought about doing it seriously." "You should. These would do very well in the right galleries." She spent another hour looking at my paintings and asking about my techniques, my inspiration, my artistic influences. It was the first time anyone had been genuinely interested in my art as art, not as a cute hobby for an elderly woman. When she left, she took several business cards for galleries she thought might be interested in my work. "Margaret," she said at the door, "I hope you know that not everyone in this family thinks you were wrong to stand up for yourself. Sometimes people need to be shocked before they can see clearly." That night, I called one of the galleries Elizabeth had recommended. The owner was interested in seeing my portfolio. 2 weeks later, I had my first gallery showing scheduled for the following spring. David started calling more regularly after that, and gradually our conversations became less stilted, more natural. He began asking about my art, my classes, my volunteer work. He seemed genuinely interested in my life outside of being his mother. Sarah, on the other hand, remained distant and cold. When she spoke to me at all, it was with barely concealed resentment, as if my refusal to accept her apology was some kind of personal attack. That was fine. I no longer needed her approval or affection. I had my own life now. Emma and Jake visited every other weekend, and those visits became the highlight of my weeks. We painted together, cooked together, explored Chicago together. They were getting to know me as a person, not just as their grandmother. "Grandma," Emma said one afternoon as we painted in my back garden, "are you happier now?" It was such a perceptive question from an 8-year-old. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "Much happier." "Good. You seem more like yourself." "More like myself." When had I stopped being myself around my own family? When had I become so focused on being useful that I'd forgotten to be authentic? That evening, after Emma and Jake had gone home, I looked at the painting I'd been working on, a view of the Chicago skyline at sunset, all gold and pink and purple. It was beautiful, and it was mine. My vision, my skill, my creation. For years, I defined myself by my relationships to other people. Richard's wife, David's mother, Emma and Jake's grandmother, Sarah's unwanted mother-in-law. But I was also Margaret, artist, teacher, woman of worth and substance and dignity. The holidays approached, and for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading them. I wouldn't be cooking a massive dinner for people who barely acknowledged my effort. I wouldn't be buying expensive gifts for people who gave me thoughtless afterthoughts in return. I wouldn't be smiling through subtle insults and outright dismissals. Emma called me in November. "Grandma, what are we doing for Thanksgiving?" "What would you like to do?" I asked. "Can we cook together? Just us and Grandpa Richard and maybe Jake if he wants to come?" "That sounds perfect. What about Daddy and Mommy Sarah?" "They're welcome to join us if they want to," I said. "But we're not going to beg anyone to spend time with us." Thanksgiving turned out to be wonderful. Richard came, looking sheepish and uncertain. David came alone. Sarah had decided to spend the holiday with her family instead. Emma and Jake helped me cook, and we laughed more than we had in years. After dinner, David helped me clean dishes while Richard played board games with the kids. "Mom," David said quietly, "I want to tell you something." "What?" "Sarah and I have been having problems. Not just because of the wedding thing, but other things. She doesn't want me to have a close relationship with you or the kids. She thinks family should be, I don't know, more separate." I continued washing dishes, letting him work through what he wanted to say. "I love her," he continued. "But I love you too, and I'm tired of feeling like I have to choose." "You don't have to choose," I said. "But you do have to decide what kind of relationships you want to have and what you're willing to do to maintain them." "I want to be closer to you," he said. "Like we used to be when I was younger." "That's not entirely up to you," I said gently. "Trust has to be rebuilt slowly." "I know. I want to try." We were making progress, David and I. It wasn't easy and it wasn't fast, but it was real. Richard, on the other hand, seemed more lost with each passing month. He'd been living between David's guest room and a small apartment he'd rented, never quite committing to either space. One evening in December, he called me crying. "I don't know who I am anymore, Margie," he said. "I don't know where I belong or what I'm supposed to do." "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want to come home. I want to be married to you again. But I don't know if you still want to be married to me." It was a fair question. Did I want to be married to Richard? The man who'd laughed when I was humiliated? The man who'd chosen his own comfort over my dignity repeatedly? "Richard," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think before you answer." "Okay. If the same situation happened again, if someone treated me disrespectfully in front of you, what would you do?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I'd defend you," he said finally. "I'd speak up. I wouldn't let anyone treat you badly." "Why didn't you do that before?" Another long pause. "Because I was a coward. Because I thought keeping peace was more important than keeping faith with you. Because I forgot that you were supposed to be the most important person in my life. And now I know that peace without justice isn't peace at all. It's just delayed conflict." It was the most insightful thing Richard had said in years. "I'm not ready for you to come home yet," I said. "But I'm willing to start over. Slowly. We can date each other again. See if we still like each other outside of our old patterns." "I'd like that," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "But Richard, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same woman you were married to before. I have my own life now, my own interests, my own independence. if we try again, it's going to be as equals, not as someone who disappears into your life." "I want that too," he said. "I want to know who you are now. I want to be proud of you instead of just used to you." Spring came early that year, and with it came my first professional art exhibition. 24 of my paintings were displayed in a small but prestigious gallery in the River North area. The opening night was magical. People I'd never met stood in front of my work and discussed technique and emotion and artistic vision. Elizabeth had come, bringing several friends who turned out to be serious collectors. Mrs. Chen from next door came, dressed in her finest outfit and beaming with pride. Even some of my students from the literacy center showed up. David came with Emma and Jake, all of them dressed up and excited. Richard came looking nervous but proud. He spent the evening standing next to my paintings like a guard, eager to tell anyone who would listen about my wife's artistic talent. Sarah didn't come. I didn't expect her to, and I wasn't disappointed. Her absence didn't diminish my joy. The best moment came when a stranger approached me near a painting of the Chicago River at dawn. "Are you the artist?" she asked. "Yes," I said, trying not to sound starstruck by my own situation. "This is stunning. The way you've captured the light reflecting on the water, it's like a poem in paint." A poem in paint. No one had ever described my work that way before. "Thank you," I said. "That means everything to me." By the end of the evening, I'd sold 6 paintings and booked 3 commissions. More importantly, I felt like I'd finally found my voice as an artist. Later, at a small celebration dinner with David, Richard, and the kids, Emma raised her juice glass for a toast. "To Grandma," she said solemnly, "for being brave and following her dreams." "To Grandma," everyone echoed. I looked around the table at these people who loved me, really loved me, not just what I could do for them, and felt a contentment I'd never experienced before. On the way home, Richard walked me to my door. "I'm proud of you, Margie," he said, "not just for the art show, but for everything, for standing up for yourself, for building this new life, for teaching us all what it means to have dignity." "Thank you," I said. "Do you think—" he began, then stopped. "Do I think what?" "Do you think we have a real chance at starting over?" I looked at him, really looked at him. He'd lost weight over the past year, and there were new lines around his eyes. But there was also something different there, something I hadn't seen in years. Respect. Not just for me, but for himself. "I think we have a chance," I said. "A real one." He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since before the wedding. "I love you, Margaret," he said, using my full name instead of the nickname that had somehow diminished me over the years. "I love you too, Richard. But more importantly, I like who we're becoming." 6 months later, Richard moved back home, not to the old patterns of our marriage, but to something new and better. He'd spent the time apart learning to cook, to manage his own schedule, to have opinions about things that mattered. I'd learned to maintain boundaries, to ask for what I needed, to value my own dreams as much as everyone else's. We were dating each other again in our 70s, and it was wonderful. David and I rebuilt our relationship slowly but surely. He started taking art classes so we'd have something to talk about besides family drama. He read books about cryptocurrency and blockchain technology so I could understand his work better. We found our way back to being friends as well as family. Sarah and I never reconciled, and that was okay. She moved to California with David after he took a job with a company in Silicon Valley. They have their life, and I have mine. David calls regularly, and the kids visit every summer. That's enough. Richard and I renewed our vows on our 38th wedding anniversary. A small ceremony in my back garden with Emma and Jake as witnesses, and Mrs. Chen providing the flowers. It felt like a beginning rather than a continuation. That night, as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset, Richard took my hand. "I never thanked you," he said. "For what?" "For saving us. For refusing to accept less than we deserved. For having the courage to blow everything up so we could build it better." "I didn't save us, Richard. We saved ourselves. We just had to remember we were worth saving." Looking back now, I realize that the wedding day when Sarah handed me that mop was the beginning of my real life, not the end of it. Sometimes the worst moments carry the seeds of the best transformations. I'm 74 now, and I've never been happier. My paintings hang in galleries across Chicago. I teach art classes to seniors who thought creativity was behind them. I travel with Richard to places we'd always dreamed of seeing. I have meaningful relationships built on mutual respect and genuine affection. But most importantly, I have myself back. The woman I was before I learned to be small, before I confused being needed with being valued, before I accepted crumbs and called it love. To anyone listening who's ever felt invisible in their own family, who's ever been handed the metaphorical mop while others enjoy the party, I want you to know something. You are worth more than what you can do for other people. Your feelings matter. Your dreams matter. You matter. It's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. It's never too late to build a life that reflects your worth. It's never too late to remember that you are the author of your own story, not just a supporting character in someone else's. Sometimes love requires us to set boundaries. Sometimes family relationships need to be rebuilt from the ground up. Sometimes the people who claim to love us need to be shocked into remembering that we're human beings with feelings and dignity. And sometimes, walking away from the table is the only way to show people you deserve a seat. Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, taken for granted by the people who should value you most? Please share your story in the comments below. And if my journey touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps me continue sharing these stories and reminds me that none of us are alone in our struggles. Remember, you are never too old to start over. You are never too old to demand respect. You are never too old to live the life you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me not just as someone's mother or wife or grandmother, but as Margaret, artist, teacher, woman of worth. Until next time, remember your value, trust your worth, and never let anyone hand you a mop when you deserve a place of honor at the table.